Hello everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Raids, and in today's video, let's talk about what might actually change with Hydra. I've got some ideas, I think, for likely changes that they could do. Remember, this is based off of the balance changes to Hydra and Hydra Clash, sort of specifically Hydra Clash, really, that they're talking about. And I do think Hydra Clash is the problem, not Hydra itself. But yeah, they announced a bunch of stuff, so let's break it down. And let's see what is actually, I think, likely to happen. So obviously the first one that we know is consolation rewards for being 4th or 5th in Hydra Clash. That's just a win. That's a great change. Fantastic. Yeah, right now you only get rewards for 1st, 2nd, 3rd. Putting some stuff in for 4th and 5th is pretty nice, right? So yeah, even if there is imbalance, which is, it's pretty likely, it's almost impossible to get perfect balance in things that, yeah, even if there's some ridiculous stuff happening, you can still come in and get rewards. That's good. That's nice. Next up, let's look at... in fact, if we go in reverse order, actually, they're saying that in order to rebalance champions, specific champions, to come in and, nerf Trunda, for the obvious example, that's something that they do not want to do until they've done other changes, which is interesting. I think it makes the job a lot more complicated than it needs to be. But hey, that's what they want to do. So that's what they're doing. Now, let's look at... These are the two main ones that we've got to speculate on. Let's look at the simpler one first. Changes to the Hydra Clash competition. So point scoring. They want to make fighting Hydra on higher difficulties more appealing in terms of clash points. So adjusting the multipliers. That's cool. They don't want to do anything about capping points or anything like that, or like taxing points for higher levels. This is pretty simple. So right now, you've got a 1x multiplier for normal, 2x for hard, 3x for brutal, and 4x for nightmare. Funny enough, I didn't go back and find the messages or anything, but back in the day, what was it, like a year ago? When they announced Hydra Clash initially, my feedback to them straight away before anything went live was, guys, you should do something about Trunda because that's going to break Hydra Clash. And I'm also really concerned about the points not being high enough for the higher things. And my concern was that people would just come into normal or hard difficulty with Trunda and smash it. Now, I wasn't fully right. Obviously, I did not anticipate how strong Trunda would be on Brutal and Nightmare. And obviously, I didn't anticipate, other stuff like Cadaver and Yannicka. I certainly didn't anticipate Aislinn and those teams. The guy didn't even exist. So there's lots of stuff I didn't predict, but I did think it was funny that this was feedback I gave before the thing even went live. That could have been fixed before it even went live. Anyway, here we are now. So let's talk about the multipliers. These are the initial ones. And I do think, if we even set aside the crazy teams, if you think about just more normal teams, I think it's frequently a thing where it's not clear that you want to push the highest difficulty. This is something that's, I think, very clear in Demon Lord, right? Because it's reward driven. To the point where you're almost better off 4-keying Ultra Nightmare. I think you are better off using 4 keys for Ultra Nightmare rather than spreading your keys amongst the other stuff. You just always want to push for the highest difficulty. It's really not the case in Hydra with Hydra Clash, right? Oftentimes, hard might be your best key, or brutal, just because you can push the points higher, and the increase in difficulty isn't really matched by this multiplier. I think the most likely thing they could change would be to simplify it like this, right? 1x for normal, 2x for hard, 4x for brutal, and 8x for nightmare. Number one, because they're all, you're multiplying the points by 2 every time, it makes it much more intuitive to understand. You're like, okay, I get double points for hard. Great. If I can do half the damage, it's equal points. For brutal, right, I'm getting double the points I do for hard. For nightmare, I'm getting double the points I do for brutal. So yeah, 1 million on normal is equal to 2 million on hard. 2 million on hard equal to 4 million on brutal. 4 million on brutal equal to 8 million on nightmare. That sort of thing. Makes it much more straightforward. I think it also more so aligns closely. Let me know, actually. I'm curious. I think it fairly well aligns with the difficulty changes. I think it's... If you moved your... Let's say you put your best team into Nightmare. If you drop them down to Brutal instead, I think it'd be fairly tricky to get double points. Here's the thing. This might still be close enough that there's an argument there, right? That if you dropped your best team from Nightmare to Brutal, yeah, yeah, you might get close. So they might want to up these even more, honestly, just to make it a complete no-brainer that there would never be any discussion. Like you could come in and you could go like this, like you could 8x and you could 16x. And like at this point, there's no question about normal or even hard being worth anything. Like brutal is great, but nightmares all the way. Like they could really go crazy here just to make it like nightmare is the bulk of it. You mean one crazy team, brutal's nice, and then you supplement it with like a hard run or maybe a normal run. They could go that far. I think that's more of a maths challenge. You'd have to really calculate it out. Again, I'm curious how you found it with your teams and how you arrange them. I think the 1, 2, 4, and 8 is relatively straightforward. And then if they ever brought out another difficulty, you could crank that up to 16, right? And just double it every single time, which is really always pushing you towards the highest difficulty. Like I said, my only concern is that this might be close enough to parity to make it not matter, whereas maybe making the multiplication more aggressive really forces you into the top key. The nice thing about this is that each one of the keys matters, right? Each key matters. You just want the nightmare one to matter most. I mean, another option could be a smaller change, could be, to go 1x, 2x, then maybe 5x and 10x. That could work fairly well too. Again, if they added another difficulty, you probably have to go all the way up to 20x though. Like I think anything less, I think anything less than doubling has a pretty big impact. So I think most likely though, it's going to be 1, 2, 4, and 8. Let me know your predictions though. What do you think? Again, I mentioned this in the video yesterday. Let me throw this in as well. This is obviously not something that I've been discussing in here, but they did, when we talked to the devs before, they did actually let us know that they have another Hydra head. Remember, there was a Hydra roadmap. Let me actually try find it. Yeah, here we go. This is from their official Twitter, guys. So we got Hydra Clan Quest. We got UX improvements. We didn't even get to phase 3. New Hydra head. New difficulty level. Leaderboards. Avatar rewards. And then another new head. And another difficulty level. So they had planned 2 additional difficulty levels and 2 Hydra heads. They confirmed to us that there is at least 1 new Hydra head that they built and finished and completed ages ago, and then they just they never actually put it into the game, but it's like done and ready to go. They never put it into the game though, because I think people found again, I'm reading between the lines here, but the implication was that people found Hydra too difficult. People weren't enjoying Hydra. They didn't want to add more complexity in to make it too hard. I do think that is something that could come in. So I think there is potential in the future. I think it's probably not this year, but next year onwards, I could totally see a new Hydra head, new Hydra difficulties as something that does come down the line. So it's just something to be aware of when we're talking about this stuff. And that could definitely mix it up. I think one bad suggestion to fix the Trunda problem, at least in my opinion, that I've seen before, was that they should release a head that just counters Trunda. And it comes to a point where you go, how does that affect the entire Hydra palette? Like, rather than just nerf Trunda if she's broken, why would you design an entire Hydra head? That's a lot of very specific where, again, you're making, it's like, how do we walk down the road? It's like, well, we could just walk down the road and that's it done. You go, wait, but Nub, what if we hired an airplane and flew around? What if we made like super complicated? It's like, yeah, we might get there in the end, I suppose, but it's making it quite difficult. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent. Look, I think this is likely. I think it's likely. I think it's a good change as well, because I think that the points not being, the multipliers not being strong enough definitely incentivizes, to really focus in on, certainly the cheesy teams like the Trunda stuff. Like your normal Trunda key might be worth more than your best nightmare key. Like it's kind of crazy, right? So it obviously exacerbates that problem. But I think even with just, building your regular teams, I do think the point multipliers are too low, that it doesn't make sense and it doesn't make the hires rewarding. We'll see. I think this is the minimum, and it could be more. Really, I do. Let's look then at modifying Hydra itself. And there's a lot of interest. So I was kind of like theory crafting some things here. I hit on a bunch of stuff. So, champions are great. Some become extraordinary when fighting Hydra. The issues with Hydra itself, first and foremost, blah, blah, blah. So again, they don't want to nerf a specific champion, which I think, again, is making life more difficult. But what would they do? What general things do they put in to fix or to basically nerf these teams? That seems the intent. We want to nerf these champions, but we don't want to nerf these champions, right? We want to nerf stuff in general so that you don't feel your champion is nerfed. But I mean, really, at the end of the day, they are, right? They are. I don't know. Like, for some people, the semantics of it matters a lot. For me, I care more about the outcome, really. Anyway. It's like, don't nerf Corpulent Cadaver, like nerf Shields. It's like, well, that's still nerfing Corpulent Cadaver. Anyway, whatever. They nerfed him directly. This is like Trunda. So this is like a good instance of a good example of Trunda. This is from Boozar. I'll link all these videos in the description. So for this one, like he smacks a decapitated head for 2 million. And then it's going to hit other decapitated heads for like 20 or 30 million. In fact, if you guys want to, I'll just do a quick breakdown of the Trunda mats. So roughly speaking, this was I just did like a quick sort of rough calculation here. It's not quite accurate, but if you want to know sort of what's roughly going on, hopefully I didn't leave any typos in. You basically I said like a trend, let's say 7k attack and 400% crit damage, 50% increased attack. So you start off with her attack multi. This is how all damage works in the game. The attack multiplier, so in this case the 7k attack, multiply by 6. That's the multiplier on her A2. So if you look at like hellhades.com, we have for all the different champions the multiplier. It might be a defense multiplier, HP. For her, it's a 6 times attack multiplier, which is a good, very good single target hit. So you multiply it by 6, then we multiply it by 1.5, or we could actually maybe make that more clear by 150%, which is the 50% increase attack as well, which gives you 63,000. Then you get the crit damage multiplier, which is 63,000. You do 100% damage just always, and then you get a bonus 400% with the crit. So 500% total, up to 315. Books then, let's say it's 20% on her A2, brings you up to this. I simplified the masteries, but each of the mastery multipliers would go through. I simplified it to 20% just for the sake of an example. And he jumps up to 453,000. Then with decapitation, you do triple damage, so it goes up to 1.360800, so 1.4 million roughly. Now, what happens with her A2? Why it is broken? So her A2, it says, you know, it does 60% damage to everybody else. So 60% of 1.3 million is 800,000. Now, that's obviously not what's happening unless you think that 30 million is 60% of 2 million. What actually happens for Trunda specifically is it basically applies all the multipliers again. And by the way, you could have other multipliers too. So big ones that you could add in. I'm not sure if we have them here, but let's say like protection sets. Right, every protection set is giving you damage multiplier. Bad Alcazar, right? Gerptuk, they give you more damage multipliers. All that sort of, they're big ones that up the damage even more. But yeah, so what you basically get is you get the 60% second hit, but then it does everything again, right? So you get that 800,000, and then you multiply it by crit damage, now up to 4 million. Then you multiply it by books, you're up to 5 million. Then the masteries, you're up to almost 6 million. Then the decapitation modifier, up to like 18 million. You know, and that's basically what's happening here. So crit damage is really valuable on Trunda. Like you want as much crit damage as possible because it multiplies the second hit, which is where the big damage comes from. Basically benefits from crit damage twice, whereas attack only happens once. That's the basis, but crit multiplies it twice. Like if you just made it not crit her second hit, for instance, if you said, well, you can't crit in the second hit, it would nerf the damage on the second hit by 80%. It would still be crazy. Like you'd still be doing, instead of like 20 million, you'd be doing what, 4 million? It's still extremely strong, but nowhere near as strong. And in that case, it would actually sort of break the Trunda team if you did that, because how the Trunda team works and why I call it a cheese team is you have like this, you know, you basically one-shot heads. Like we got a freshly respawned head in, and yeah, like you basically come in and you kill the head before it even takes a turn, so it stops the devour timer. Yeah, I mean, it basically locks out the devour timer. You can ignore all the mechanics, etc. So that's sort of how it works. Some other teams we've got. I love this one. I think this one, the thumbnail from this one from Tyraku was, I hate this team. I love it. So this is like a Yannicka team. So this, you can see, you build up a massive shield with like Wixwell, or usually Wixwell. Brogni, I think, can do it too. I'm not super sure. But you keep extending the shield, you keep growing the shield, then you let Head of Mischief steal your shield when it's grown really big, and then Yannicka blows it up. So we can see right here, he's at 17 million damage. The shield has been stolen. Mischief spreads the shield. Then Yannicka blows it up. And you can see that she's just hit this head for 321 million damage. And we jump from 17 million to 1 billion damage, right, in the one hit. This was, again, from Bronco. This is another variant, which is the Aislinn plus Ironclad. So Aislinn can rip off shields. Now, he has a cap on the damage, but he doesn't have a cap on the healing. He heals you for the amount of shields that you ripped off. Now, Ironclad is a rare that does damage equal to 50% of a surplus heal. So you can do massive hits. So for instance, we can see here with Ironclad, he's just done 950 million in a single hit. And in fact, if we add up the other heads, he's done like 2 billion in a single hit right there, which is pretty crazy. So I think one thing that they could do in terms of changing mechanics, just a damage cap. I think a regular damage cap could be something they would do. I thought, like, some examples. What if they did a 10 million damage cap? Like, just a flat number, 10 million. That would absolutely... It completely change the shield rip-off teams. Now, it might not break them entirely, though, right? Like, you would just have to rip the shields off more consistently. But, I mean, obviously, right there, we were doing almost 1 billion damage on a couple of heads. That's obviously not going to work, right? If you limit it to 10 million. So that would break that. For Trunda, who, you know, again, you'd still be doing massive damage. I think it doesn't quite work. The problem being, if a 10 million damage cap, we run into a problem, which is that you can still one-shot heads and skip a bunch of mechanics, right? So if I put this in, this is sort of the maximum health of the different Hydra heads. So on normal, Suffering, the tankiest head is 1.3 million. On Hard, it's 2.7. On Brutal, 4.1. On Nightmare, 5.1. Even a 10 million damage cap, like, you can still one-shot heads pretty easily. So that's sort of a problem. I think that's something they would want to avoid. Then I said, what if you put in like a much more aggressive damage cap? What about a 1 million damage cap? Now, that becomes that's kind of aggressive. That obviously massively neuters Trunda, right? If she's hitting for 2 million, easily enough, right? And then that is multiplied in splashes. Well, you're cutting that 2 million down to 1 million. That's really reducing things. You've got to run in here, but like, we can see like a Toshiro, who's like the top damage dealer. Again, these are crazy builds, but like right here, he's hitting for over 1 million with regular hits. So a 10 million damage cap really only affects very, very, very limited teams. A 1 million damage cap affects a lot of champions. Like, I was chatting to Panda, like my Turvold, for instance, can quite easily hit 1 million on his A3 on both hits. Yeah, he can quite easily hit 1 million. I think it's not that insane to push a Turvold to be hitting for 2 million per hit. Panda, who's one of the top players in the game, I was chatting to him. He says he could get his to 3 million per hit, which is 6 million total. Like, and this is a double hitter. Imagine a champion with just a big single target nuke. They could easily be hitting for, you know, if they were as strong as Turvold. I don't know if there's anyone that is as strong as Turvold with a single hit, but let's say hypothetically you could do a 6 million single target nuke with like a massive hit. Like, I think I saw like Nice. I think I did some testing on the test server, and he was doing maybe like 3 million or something with this. Like, it's okay, but like a 1 million cap really neuters them, right? That affects a lot of champions. And that becomes pretty brutal. That really affects a lot of people. Yeah, it absolutely cripples the cheese teams, but it really cripples almost every team. But then I was thinking, what if we did like a what if we did like a percentage health cap? And then that got me thinking, well, we got a cap on enemy max HP, which is this stuff here. So a 1 million damage cap sounds really aggressive. But then there is the best case scenario right now is a 500,000 cap on enemy max HP, which is against Head of Suffering. Against Mischief, the squishiest head, about 240,000 is the max you can do. with enemy max HP. Enemy max HP cap is way more aggressive than this. And that got me thinking, like, is the enemy max HP cap actually kind of bad? Because that's what we've seen with the power creep in Hydra and with, you know, just other champions doing the crazy damage. Is enemy max HP champs have fallen off a decent chunk. Now, they're still really good, but they're not doing these crazy numbers. And if we do get more power creep in the game, right? If we get more stats, more stuff to make our champions stronger, like look at that hit from Garol, right? Which is quite likely that we will get more stuff to make us stronger. They're going to fall, like, look at that again. They're going to fall further and further behind because they're affected by this cap. Again, here's another thing, right? If you put in any sort of aggressive cap, whether it be like this or this, again, like someone like Garol, like ally attack, or champions with lots of attacks, frequent attacks become really powerful, right? Which could be a problem. So let's say someone with a massive single target hit, you're capped, not so good. Whereas let's say someone like a Krutraxa will become really powerful because she's got 4 hits, right? Not going to hit the cap. It's exactly what we've seen with enemy max HP. Right? So let's say Royal Guard, decent damage for Hydra, but it's capped, right? You're hitting a hard cap. Whereas, let's say Wallmaster Atharion in the same faction, it's a double hitter. This is what we see with enemy max HP. Because of the cap, multi-hits become really powerful. Marius, again, even more powerful because it's a triple hit. So you can hit the cap 3 times. So that's a problem. Like, these damage caps actually have a really, really big impact in terms of what's going on, right? Max HP cap. Should the cap be raised? This was something that I actually started to strike me. Maybe they need to increase the cap on enemy max HP damage dealers because, you know, as people get more endgame and more power creep comes on in, it's falling off. One big problem actually is ignore defense. Like, if you think about it, you can have 20% ignore defense. We put like its own area. Ignore defense, right? You can have 20% from area bonuses. You can have 35% from Merciless. You could have on top of that 5% from Cruel if you wanted. Yeah, it's getting insane. Now, if you have Crushing Ren 6-star, you get 31% on Nightmare. Crushing Ren 6-star. Then you could have 25% on Helm Smasher. You're actually over capped at this point. Like 20, like you're up to 55, 60, you're up to 91. Like Helm Smasher is overkill. And this becomes a problem as well, because now if they add further Hydra difficulties, usually, right? I don't know how did they get themselves out of this hole. I feel like these area bonuses should never have come in, honestly, for Hydra. I think it's actually been a pretty big mistake. Maybe it does need to be nerfed, which is annoying to nerf it. But it becomes quite like normally when you make stuff more difficult, like increasing the defense. Like this would have been back in the day in Hydra, when you go up the difficulties, right? You don't do as much damage. It's harder to do damage because their defense goes up. Now, you can actually be ignoring almost all of their defense. Like, even if you take away the Crushing Rend, like, you can be ignoring most of it. Like, if we take Crushing Rend out, you still have, like, 30% Helm Smasher and Cruel, 65 at Merciless. You have 85% ignore defense, even without Crushing Rend 6-star. Like, that's nuts. That's crazy. So, even if they add further difficulties, like with higher defense numbers, it doesn't matter. Like, you're still doing most of the damage. And here's the thing. If you come in then, and if you give them crazy amounts of defense so that the defense has an impact, even when you're ignoring most of it, well, for anyone that doesn't have all these defense ignore things stacked, your damage will absolutely plummet. It'll be brutal. So, man, they've dug themselves a hole with this ignore defense. I'm not sure what they can do, honestly. I'm not sure what they can do. I do think Crushing Rend should be reworked. That's an unpopular opinion. But the rest of the stuff is difficult. Like, maybe you could nerf the area bonuses. That's not going to be popular. Like, nothing they do here is going to be popular. None of this stuff is going to be popular because, again, you're making teams weaker. Again, that's something as well. Like, all of this stuff is making teams weaker. One suggestion I think is an interesting one is you could have heads when they respawn in be immune to damage, right? Right now they get damage reduction. You could make them just immune to damage. That would hard nerf Trunda, because now you can't one-shot freshly respawned heads. The heads will actually take turns actually use their abilities. They'll actually devour people. That nerfs Trunda pretty hard. But it doesn't nerf these teams where you're just one-shotting fresh heads anyway. Like these teams here, the shield teams, they're not doing anything to decapitated heads. It's all massive damage to fresh heads, just normal heads. So that's the problem. And use Emic. Both of these teams, I think, are using Emic to delay the devour, I believe. I haven't watched them too much in detail. That's a problem as well. You start jumping through a lot of hoops, right? It starts to become really complicated. For me, another thing, actually, to add into this that I think ties in with the max HP is, like, we're seeing crazy damage here against decapitated heads. If we jump on a bit and we see, like, some actual heads that are alive, and we jump on a bit more, he's talking. Damage against, right, living heads, it's not that crazy, like 300,000. I think a lot of these crazy damage numbers, apart from the shield teams, sort of just break it, right? But like the crazy Trunda numbers, the crazy numbers from these champs really come in. Again, of course, he's ending the battle as soon as I jump in that far. The crazy damage really, really comes in against decapitated heads. Maybe they could change to the decapitation stuff as well. Maybe decapitation. Nerf decapitation, right? Lower decapitation damage bonus. That is another option, right? Again, that it massively nerfs Trunda specifically because, well, Trunda, as we talked about, Trunda is benefiting from the decapitation modifier twice. So if you lower, if we straight up removed it, you'd be lowering Trunda's damage absolutely massively, like dividing it by 3 and then dividing it by 3 again. So you'd be dividing it by 9. Like she would do 1/9 of the damage that she currently does. Now, it also nerfs everyone, though. Like, that's the thing. If you do that, everybody gets nerfed if you lower the decapitation bonus. This becomes quite a big rework. You'd have to, I don't know, maybe really extend the amount of time. One nice thing they could maybe do, you could really extend the amount of time that heads are decapitated. So a decapitated head is not like, ooh, squeeze in as much massive damage as we can in a short period of time, but like, we get a break from Hydra mechanics for quite a big chunk of time. Cool. That'll be an interesting and different design. It's rewarding in a different way. I don't know if people would enjoy it, though. It's quite fun to see the massive damage numbers, and that's sort of my issue with these damage caps as well. It's fun to see the really big numbers. But maybe decapitation does push them too high. I could see them lowering this from triple damage to double. I think it's actually not impossible that they lower the decapitation damage bonus, but then maybe lower the speed of the heads and leave them decapitated for longer. Maybe. But again, like that doesn't fix any of the crazy teams. It just sort of lowers the damage a bit. You could raise the max HP damage dealer cap. Max HP damage dealers are really, really strong when heads are alive, because it's easy to do big numbers with them. It's harder with regular champions. It's when heads are decapitated that enemy max HP falls behind, because enemy max HP, you're probably pretty close to hitting these caps when heads are alive, and you're not benefiting from the triple damage when they're decapitated. You don't get that benefit. Whereas a regular damage dealer very much does. A regular damage dealer comes in and their damage like triples. So these decapitated heads becomes really powerful. And when we start stacking like crazy powerful champions, ignoring almost all defense, right? Just stat bloat everything else into the game, right? That's where things just really start to ramp up and go crazy, and the damage potential becomes absolutely massive, right? So yeah, let me know. What do you think should be changed? I think that likely, I do think on top of upping the multipliers, like I think the easiest thing to do is just literally to come in and to nerf these specific teams is by far the easiest thing. But sadly, in my opinion, that's not happening. Like I think honestly, all of this stuff should be deleted. The crit damage, books, masteries, gear sets, bonuses. Well, anyway, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not going to happen. They could just make it not a crit. That would fix Trunda, but it doesn't fix the other things. I think probably a percent damage cap is something that could happen. And I think that lowering the decapitation damage bonus alongside that, so it actually becomes quite difficult to hit the cap. But I mean, like, even if we increase the max HP cap, right now it's 10%. Like, even if you up it to 20%, if you say there's just a 20% max HP damage cap on everyone, nobody can exceed 20% max HP damage in a single hit. That's something that could happen. You couldn't hit Suffering for more than 1 million. You couldn't hit Mischief for more than like 500 million, roughly. Like that does affect a lot of champs. Now, again, if you lower the decapitation damage bonus, it becomes harder to hit that, but you could get close. Yeah, I don't know. Let me know. What do you think they should change? I think these are aggressive changes. It's probably too much. Maybe a 25% max HP cap. And again, lower the decapitation bonus to like maybe double damage, or even lower to just like 50% bonus damage. That could be interesting. 50% bonus damage. If you lower the decapitation damage bonus, it basically buffs all the max HP champions quite a bit. I don't know. There's a lot going on here. This is why I've been in favor of just nerfing the obviously like crazy things, because it's just easier, right? It's just easier to go, oh, okay, well, Trunda's, her A2 is doing crazy stuff, just nerf it. Rather than putting in these big changes that can affect lots of different teams, lots of different people. It could put regular Hydra keys in jeopardy as well. I think you have to put in, if you do nerf anything or put any limits, you have to then buff stuff as well, so that, that's very important. Somebody that is one keying Nightmare Hydra, let's say, let's say someone that's one keying Hard Hydra right now, whatever changes you put in, they should be able to one key Hard Hydra after. And any limitations could potentially lower that. Yeah, guys, let me know. What do you think? What do you think they'll actually change? Those would be my thoughts, my predictions as to what will actually happen. I think you could see a % HP damage cap. I think lowering the decapitation bonus, adding in something else to make up for it, like more time decapitated, could be fine. And yeah, I think a percentage max HP cap on everyone, potentially even raising the max HP damage dealers cap a bit as well. Buff max HP damage dealers, which would be cool. I'd be up for that. Buffing your Royal Guards and Husks, they're nice and accessible. It works. Yeah, it cripples a lot. Honestly, cripples a lot of these teams. I know another thing they talked about was putting a cap on infinite shields, because it's mostly just used for cheesy stuff. That affects a lot of Wixwell clan boss teams, though. That's a problem as well. There's a lot of problems. Let me know. What do you think? What do you think? I'll see you all next time. Bye.